1. Excalibur, the sword of King Arthur. Breton mythology. Excalibur is probably the most famous weapon in Western mythology, and its power wasn't in the blade but in what it meant. The story most people know is the sword and the stone. Whoever could pull it free was the rightful king of Britain. Arthur pulled it. But the older versions of the legend are more interesting. In those, Excalibur was given to Arthur by the Lady of the Lake, a supernatural figure who rose from the water and handed him the sword directly. Two completely different origin stories that coexist in the legend without anyone seeming troubled by the contradiction. What both versions agree on is what the sword represented: legitimacy. Excalibur didn't make Arthur powerful. It made him king. When he was mortally wounded at the Battle of Camlan, his last instruction was for the sword to be thrown back into the lake. It had to be returned. Power, in the Arthurian world, was only ever borrowed. 2. Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor. Norse mythology. Mjolnir was forged by the dwarves Sindri and Brokkr under a bet, and the result was almost a failure. A fly disturbed the dwarf working the bellows mid-forge, and the handle came out shorter than intended. Despite that, the hammer could level mountains, always returned to Thor's hand after being thrown, and was the primary weapon against the giants threatening the 9 worlds. What most people don't know is that Mjolnir was also used in ceremonies of blessing, birth, and marriage. The same weapon that crushed giant skulls was placed on the lap of brides during wedding rituals to ensure fertility and divine protection. Thor wasn't just a god of war, he was a god of order, and Mjolnir was the instrument of both destruction and sanctification. The Vikings wore miniature Mjolnir amulets around their necks the way others wear a cross. Many of those amulets have been found in Scandinavian graves. They took it with them. 3. Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword of Susanoo. Japanese mythology. The origin of this sword is one of the strangest in any mythology. Susanoo, the storm god, killed an 8-headed serpent called Yamata no Orochi after getting it drunk on sake. When he cut open one of its tails, he found a sword hidden inside. He named it Ama no Murakumo no Tsurugi, the sword of the gathering clouds of heaven, and gave it to his sister Amaterasu, the sun goddess. Centuries later, the sword was given to the hero Yamato Takeru, who used it to survive a trap. Enemies set a field of grass on fire around him, but he used the sword to cut the grass and change the direction of the flames. That is how it got its more famous name, Kusanagi, the grass cutter. Today, the sword is said to be kept at the Atsuta Shrine in Nagoya, Japan, where it has been for over 1,000 years. Nobody outside the imperial family and the shrine's priests has seen it in centuries. It may be there, it may not. Japan has decided the mystery is more important than the proof. 4. Gungnir, the spear of Odin. Norse mythology. If Mjolnir belonged to the strongest god, Gungnir belonged to the wisest. Odin's spear was also forged by the dwarves and had one absolute property: it never missed its target. Once thrown, it always struck what it was aimed at, regardless of distance, obstacles, or divine interference. But its most famous use wasn't in battle. At the beginning of the first war in Norse mythology, the war between the Aesir and the Vanir gods, Odin threw Gungnir over the heads of the enemy as a ritual act of declaration. From that moment on, throwing a spear over the enemy lines before battle was the traditional way Norse warriors declared war and dedicated the fallen to Odin. Every soldier killed in that battle was Odin's. Gungnir wasn't just a weapon. It was the instrument that turned death in combat into something sacred. 5. Durandal, the indestructible sword of the knight Roland. French and Carolingian legend. Roland was the greatest knight of Charlemagne's army, and Durandal was his sword, said to be the sharpest blade in all the world and completely indestructible. According to the legend, inside the hilt were sealed several holy relics: a tooth of St. Peter, blood of St. Basil, hair of St. Denis, and a piece of the Virgin Mary's garment, which made Durandal not just a weapon, but a sacred object. At the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass in 778, surrounded and dying, Roland refused to let the sword fall into enemy hands. He struck it against a rock, repeatedly trying to shatter it. The rock split, the sword did not. In his final attempt, he threw it as far as he could. According to some versions of the legend, Durandal ended up embedded in a cliff in Rocamadour, in southern France, where it remained for centuries. There is actually a sword embedded in the rock wall of Rocamadour's sanctuary. Nobody claims it is the real one, but nobody has removed it either. 6. The Trident of Poseidon, the weapon of the god of the sea. Greek mythology. Poseidon's trident was forged by the Cyclopes, the same beings who made Zeus's lightning bolts and Hades' helmet of invisibility. It was the weapon that gave Poseidon dominion over the sea, earthquakes, and horses. With it, he could shatter rocks, raise storms, trigger earthquakes, and calm the ocean at will. The trident was also an instrument of creation. In the founding myth of Athens, Poseidon struck the Acropolis with his trident and made a saltwater spring burst forth, offering it as a gift to the city. Athena offered an olive tree. The Athenians chose the olive tree and the city took her name. Poseidon, furious, flooded the surrounding plains. It was both the most powerful and most temperamental weapon in the Greek pantheon. Its wielder was a god who took losing very personally and had the entire ocean to express his displeasure. 7. The Sword of Damocles, the sword hanging by a horse's hair. Greco-Roman legend. This is the only weapon on this list that was never used and was never meant to be. Its power was entirely psychological. Damocles was a courtier who told the tyrant Dionysius II of Syracuse that his life must be wonderful, full of power and luxury. Dionysius offered to let him experience it firsthand. He sat Damocles on his throne, surrounded him with every pleasure imaginable, and hung a sword above his head, suspended by a single horse's hair. Damocles sat there, unable to enjoy anything, unable to eat, unable to drink, staring at the blade that could fall at any moment. That was the point. Dionysius was showing him what power actually felt like from the inside, permanent, paralyzing anxiety. The sword of Damocles became one of the most enduring metaphors in Western culture for the tension that accompanies power and privilege. No blood was ever spilled, no blow was ever struck. It didn't need to be. 8. Shamshir-e Zomorod-Negar, the emerald-encrusted sword of Zahak. Persian mythology. This is the least known weapon on this list and possibly the darkest. In the Shahnameh, the great Persian epic written by Ferdowsi in the 10th century, Zahak was a king corrupted by the demon Ahriman, who kissed him on both shoulders and caused 2 serpents to grow from the spots, one on each side. The serpents could only be fed with human brains. Zahak's emerald-encrusted sword, the Shamshir-e Zomorod-Negar, was the instrument of that horror. It was used to behead the young men whose brains were fed to the serpents daily. The sword was not legendary for its power in battle, but for what it represented. Tyranny fed by beauty, a blade covered in precious stones used for systematic slaughter. In Persian tradition, Zahak's reign lasted 1,000 years until the hero Feridun defeated him and chained him inside a mountain. The sword's legend survived because it captured something true about how cruelty works. It always comes adorned.